Is day 11 of Moda's Stitch Pink project. Today's block is called 5 and 9. It is a series of 9 patches, 5 of them. And in the pattern, I'm going to put this down so you can see what I'm talking about here. You can see I have part of this block laid out. I decided to do mine a kind of controlled scrappy. If you look at the diagram of the block, it seems like they have a row of darks going both directions, like a big X. So I tried to kind of maintain that same feel. But aside from that, I just kind of put together combinations that I liked for the 9 patches. Of course, you are welcome to do it however you want, including strip piecing and cutting them into slices like we did on a previous block. But anyhow, I went ahead and cut the individual 1 3/4 inch squares in order to be able to kind of control where I put my colors. I'm going to sew some of this together, and then I will be back to show you the next step. I have all my 9 patches put together, and I took a picture of it to make sure that I did actually achieve the diagonal X, and it's pretty good because it's so scrappy. It's not as distinct as it might be if I had used like all of this dark or something like that. I did do all to have some consistency in my blocks. I did use the same center in each of them, but the rest of the fabrics I mixed up a lot. Your 9 patches should be 4 1/4 inches when you're done to match your background squares. And then you'll put it together in 3 rows of 3 blocks. And I will come back after I've done that and show you the finished block. I have the block done, but I need to tell you I did a do-over on it because I told you to take a picture, that taking a picture was helpful in order to make sure that your color placement is pretty decent. But what I didn't say was that you can also use that picture if you make a mistake in where you place your 9 patches. And when I got it all put together, I realized I had my center block in another place and my diagonal darks had completely disappeared, and so I ended up taking it all apart and putting it all back together again. Another thing that happened to me is when I was sewing my rows together, the seams kind of wanted to slip off of each other a little bit and not stay lined up. So I got out something that I use kind of infrequently. It's called a fork pin. If you can see that, it's two pins that are looped together by a wire. We have these at the Overbrook Quilt Connection. They also make them with a handle instead of just the loop. They're a little bit easier to hold on to that way. We have both styles. Anyhow, that's one of those things that I don't use very often, but when I do, I'm really glad that I have. Now, you know, that's not to say you couldn't achieve the same thing with 2 straight pins, but what a fork pin does is it allows you to pin on either side of your nested seam at the same time. And then it allows you, you know, it makes it stay in place as you're sewing it. So anyhow, one of those things I don't use very often, but when I do, I'm glad I have them. But like I said, you can achieve the same thing with 2 pins on a pin on either side of your seam. So this is our finished block. If you want a more distinct difference between the darks and mediums. You might want to do a coordinated one where you do the 4 outside blocks the same and the center one different with very distinct darks. That's kind of how the pattern was written. As I said, I chose to do mine differently. But I hope that I've kind of given you some of the pitfalls that you can get into when you're doing Scrappy. That's one of the reasons that Amy asks me to do these demos, because she assumes that some of you may have the same issues that I run into, and if I can save you a little bit of time or a little bit of grief along the way, then hopefully this is helpful for you. I got caught up in all of the redoing I had to do on this block, and I forgot to tell you there are 2 sashing strips to put on this one. We did that on a previous block to get it up to our 12.5-inch size. So they have you cut an 11 3/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch rectangle for the top, and then along one side you put a 12.5 by 1 1/4. So this is actually our completed block, and I will see you back tomorrow for block 12. Have a good time with this one. See you tomorrow.